Have you ever wondered what it would feel like if the world's most powerful economies and the largest union of nations were shaken by a single, shocking blow? Europe, a continent long seen as the very symbol of stability and trust, is now showing cracks so deep that its own member states are turning against each other. In August 2025, Hungary stunned not just Europe but the entire world. Prime Minister Viktor Orbán declared that if Ukraine continued its attacks on Russia, Hungary would cut off its electricity supply. Think about that for a second. A European Union member threatening to plunge another country into darkness. This isn't just about power lines or electricity grids. This is a direct challenge to the very foundation of unity that the European Union was built upon. And Orbán didn't stop there. He went even further, boasting that if he wanted, he could finish Ukraine in a day. That's not just rhetoric aimed at Kyiv. That's a shot fired at Europe's collective security, NATO's long-term strategy, and the fragile trust of the Western world itself. So the question is this simply political bluster, or the early signs of something much bigger, something far more dangerous? But the story doesn't end here, because at the same time, Europe is grappling with another storm: frozen Russian assets worth billions of euros. When the war began, Europe and the G7 froze nearly £260 billion of Russia's wealth. Out of this, while £190 billion is locked away at Euroclear, a financial giant based in Belgium. And in a bold, some would say risky move, the EU decided to use those frozen assets as collateral to hand Ukraine a $50 billion loan. In other words, Russia's own money is now being turned against Russia. But Hungary has drawn a red line. Orbán says, "Stop this game, or we'll use our veto." And here's the dangerous twist. If Hungary makes good on that threat, Europe will be forced to repay Ukraine's loan from its own pocket, meaning more inflation, higher taxes, and a deeper slowdown that ordinary Europeans, already struggling with rising prices, will have to carry on their backs. And just when you think it couldn't get more complicated, smaller states like Estonia step in. Estonia insists those frozen assets should never be returned to Russia. Their argument: giving the money back wouldn't be punishment, it would be a reward. But then comes the bigger question. If Europe does this, if it seizes Russia's assets permanently, how can the rest of the world ever trust European banks again? Today, it's Russia. Tomorrow, it could be China, or Saudi Arabia, or any other major power. And if global investors start believing that Europe's financial system bends under political pressure, then billions, even trillions of dollars could flee European markets overnight. And if that happens, the very foundation of Europe's economy could begin to crumble. Now, think about just how dangerous this situation really is. On one side, you have Hungary openly siding with Russia, blocking EU policies again and again. On the other, countries like Estonia demanding that Russia's frozen assets be permanently seized as punishment. And caught in the middle, the entire European Union, already struggling with economic pressures, political cracks, and a deepening security crisis. No matter which path Europe chooses, the risks are enormous. If it returns Russia's money, then taxpayers, ordinary Europeans, will be forced to repay Ukraine's loan. If it seizes the assets, trust in Europe's banking system will collapse as the world begins to see Europe as unsafe for foreign capital. And if Hungary uses its veto, Russia walks away with a direct advantage, while Europe looks fractured and weak. Every choice leads to danger. And then comes the twist. Euroclear, the company holding most of Russia's frozen wealth, has quietly earned €5 billion in profit in just 2 years. Not a single cent of that went to Ukraine. Not a cent went back to Russia. Instead, one financial giant pocketed billions while war rages on. This is the uncomfortable truth. Even in the middle of war, the real game is profiteering. While citizens tighten their belts, face rising taxes, and lose jobs, corporations keep cashing in. So people are beginning to ask the hard question: is this war really being fought against Russia, or is it being waged against ordinary people whose pockets are emptied, whose lives are disrupted, while the powerful, whether in Moscow, Brussels, or on Wall Street, always find a way to come out ahead? And now, Europe stands at a dangerous crossroads. If it returns Russia's assets, it undermines 2 years of sanctions, exposing them as nothing more than empty words. Russia wins. If it seizes the assets, the world sees Europe as unreliable, a place where money can vanish if politics geopolitics demand it. And if Hungary keeps rebelling, then the EU itself risks breaking apart, because a union is only as strong as the unity of its members. And Orban's veto doesn't just block a policy, it exposes the weakness of the entire European project. So the real question is Europe ready to pay such a heavy price? Or is it slowly dismantling the very foundation it was built upon? Because in the end, the deepest cost won't be paid by politicians or by corporations. It will be paid by the citizens, by the workers struggling with inflation, by families choosing between heating their homes and buying food, by the unemployed, watching industries shrink as investors pull their money away. If Russia's money is returned, taxpayers will carry Ukraine's burden. If the assets are seized, investors will flee. And if the EU fractures, the promise of security itself will collapse. This is the real crisis. And it's not just about Russia, it's about Europe's survival and the lives of millions of its people. In every possible scenario, whether it's crushing taxes, relentless inflation, or the collapse of security guarantees, one truth remains: it's Europe's citizens who will pay the price. But the question is, how long will people silently endure this burden? Because this isn't just a story about Europe and Russia. No, this is about the global economy and the balance of power itself. One wrong step from Europe and the shockwaves won't stop in Brussels or Moscow. They'll ripple across Wall Street, Shanghai, shaking financial markets worldwide. Trust in banks will falter, investors will pull back, and suddenly the very foundation of the dollar, the euro, and the Western financial system itself will be questioned. And when trust collapses in finance, everything follows. Businesses, jobs, investments, inflation, everyday lives. That's why the world is watching so closely. Major economies like China, India, and the BRICS nations aren't just observing from a distance. They're quietly building alternatives, new payment systems, new trade routes, backup plans for the day the West's credibility breaks. The issue of Russia's frozen assets has become more than a financial dispute. It's a test of whether Europe is still the world's trusted financial hub, or if its credibility is crumbling piece by piece. If Europe fails this test, it won't just hand Russia a symbolic victory. It will hand a victory to Asia, to the global south, to every country preparing to step out of the West's shadow. For the first time, the world will realize blindly trusting Western systems is dangerous, and alternatives must be built. So what happens next? Does Hungary's veto hand Moscow a win without a fight? Do smaller states like Estonia push Europe into harsher, riskier decisions? Or will the EU dig deeper into its citizens' pockets, forcing taxpayers to bear Ukraine's burden? The answers will decide more than the fate of a war. They will decide whether Europe's foundation holds, or whether it begins to crumble before our eyes. Because this conflict isn't just about guns on the battlefield, it's about trust, about credibility, about the soul of Europe itself. And the outcome won't just reshape a continent, it will decide the balance of power for decades to come. Who leads the world tomorrow? The West or Asia and the global South? That's the real question, and the clock is already ticking. Alright friends, that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss out on new uploads. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, so jump in and let's start a conversation. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.